At this point, we would like to introduce the chairman of the board and group chief executive officer of Royal Cargo Incorporated. Of course, we all know Royal Cargo as the Philippines' first multinational freight forwarding company, and now one of the leading names in the logistics industry in the country. He has been in the freight forwarding industry for over 45 years. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Mr. Michael Raueber. He started his career as the station manager for Herman Ludwig, the pioneer logistics and forwarding company based in Germany when they put up its representative office here in the Philippines. Through his leadership, the company has established itself, Royal Cargo, I mean, as a leader in the industry in some of the not only in the Philippines but also in Asia and European countries, as well as in the North American countries. Royal Cargo provides high quality and cost efficient specialized logistics solution in the fields of international and domestic freight forwarding, warehousing and distribution, projects and heavy lift, business process outsourcing, crane and erection, customs clearance and brokerage, liquid transportation. I mean, let's ask Michael what Royal Cargo can do to support your business from a logistics standpoint earlier. But I'm very excited to hear how and what Michael will be sharing with us on how the logistic industry is coping with some of the challenges within their industry, of course. And of course, what businesses such as the attendees that are here this afternoon can do to mitigate all these disruptions and challenges. Please welcome to our digital stage, Mr. Michael Raueber. Michael?
Yes, I was thanking you actually for inviting me and also for the headline, because trends in regional global supply chain is very important as we are transforming from a global economy to regional economies. And I want to give you some data and information on some global and regional trends, which will be helpful to you. This comes from a helicopter view with a view also of practical implications. Okay, can you please go to the next slide? Okay, first of all, current key contributors to the supply chain disruption. Okay, first of all, of course, you have to realize that there was a major disruption of supply chain. If you would ask me, it's not really a disruption of one link in the chain, but it was the insufficiency of the whole supply chain in all its manifestations. So not only that, there were too few vessel spaces or too few vessels or containers or ports or warehouses, everything was too few, too little. And why did that come about? So first of all, increased currency supply. The experienced increased cost for logistics and services is only the beginning of the realization that available logistics materials and services did not match the volume of currency available for consumer spending at that time. The logistic demands across the supply chain were not met by reliable service supply for many trade lanes, as shipping lines expected lesser demand at the appearance of COVID-19. Scrapped old containers outpaced the production of new ones. Even ships were scrapped during that time. Currency inflation, however, enabled financing but also accelerated consumer spending, leading to a sudden unexpected volume increase of purchase of transportable goods and commodities, causing a near collapse of the supply chain. This also was enabled actually by the fact that people had money which they could not spend on about 30-40% of what they usually spend it for. And that was services, right? Entertainment services, travels, restaurants, and so on, which suddenly was not anymore available to spend. So they were sitting at home, they were probably bored, and they had access to computers and the internet and the availability of online shopping, and off they went and bought. Okay, then high global inflation is something we have to address. The Euromotor forecast global inflation rose between 6 to 9% in 2022, versus the annual average of 3.8% from 2019 to 2021. And the 6.9% is probably not the end of it. So on top of the bottlenecks at the international ports and container shortages, higher inflation created a ripple effect, pushing up overhead costs, including labor, fuel, transport, insurance, and other inputs needed to bring commodities to the market. So that is a problem we are facing now. Russian invasion of the Ukraine. The Russian invasion of the Ukraine had significantly impacted or has significantly impacted the global supply chain by impeding the movement of goods and commodities, driving cost increases due to product shortages, and are still driving that. Ukraine and Russia accounts for about a third of the world's wheat, a quarter of barley production, and 75% of the sunflower oil supply. All critical commodities for keeping humans fed. Hence, one of the most alarming supply chain issues resulting from the Russia-Ukraine war is the food supply shortage. Particularly impacted are the low-income countries in Africa, and as you probably have heard, even the United Nations and their organizations are very concerned about that. Okay, let me now go to next slide, please. Let me now look at history. Actually, what caused some of these disruptions, as I had explained already. Look at this slide, and you will see from 2005 to 2015, the capacity of container ships in seaborne trade accelerated by 2.5 times in container capacities in the 10 years. That was a time of heavy competition amongst the shipping lines with a low profitability, actually very low profitability, actually losses, and for some lines, huge losses, eventually bankrupting at least one big liner. But the others also suffered. And that at the same time, next slide, please, this graph shows you that while container availability and capacity was increased by 250%, the growth, the container throughput, steadily grew over the years from 2012 up to 2020 here. I think where the latest data inputs, 2021 was already a estimate, but correct, actually it continued like that. But you see, this was over 10 years growth of 30%, more or less, against 250% in container capacity. So, but yet, as of 2021 and into 2022, the available logistics capacities were still not totally sufficient to meet the demands for reliable and timely deliveries. Within 2022, however, rising inflation and increased interest costs have started to reduce demand, which has already led to a shortage of warehouse space, for example, globally, due to the slowed down movements of goods and a steep correction of freight rates. So freight rates went up to, I would say, almost ridiculous levels. And I will not hide that we benefited from that with our shipping line also, like all shipping lines. But in the meantime, they crashed down to less than 10% of the peak. So yes, we are in an age of high volatility in reality. Now, for me, this is one of the most interesting slides addressing an audience which is predominantly Asian, or at least located in Asia, if not Asian themselves. I don't believe that the majority of people and companies really know the importance of intra-Asia traffic. This is the global container trade in 2021 by trade lane, for example. You will see that intra-Asia had a 41.5% contribution to that. Far East to North America, 23%, Far East to Europe, 14.7%, Far East to Latin America, 6%, and then down, Latin America to Far East, 1.6%. The implications for us are huge opportunities to regionally develop intra-Asia traffic. And actually one of my advocacies, I think stronger advocacies, and also presentation to the old Philippine government and the new one as well, is to make use of that opportunity by the creation of an intra-Asia container line. As you probably know, our shipping line, on request of the Department of Trade and Industry of the Philippines, has put one vessel in service upon their request from the Philippines directly to Los Angeles, because we had a lot of complaints of exporters not being able to ship out their goods. But eventually our dream is, or our idea is, our vision is to go back to intra-Asia, because our vessels are just not big enough to compete with 10, 20,000 TEU vessels of our competitors if everything is okay. Of course, even with our relatively small ships, we were able to compete because of the very high rates. So again, the chart demonstrates the actual 21 volume of intra-Asia. Therefore, our advocacy is to develop the blue economy of the Philippines, not by subsidies. We are not asking for subsidies, but by removing roadblocks, reducing taxation, less red tape, and ideally no corruption. The pioneering effort here was the creation of the Irish shipping line, operating one single CV 1100 in the Philippines to the USA trade, to make the point that such is economically viable and then present under the then present high freight rates possible. It was also meant to be a challenge to Philippine ship owners to invest in creating Philippine flag capacities to meet the present challenge and make money in the process. But as I just corrected, you can do that with a small vessel going to the USA or to Europe. But intra-Asia, yes. While the charts above shows the enormous volume opportunities in the intra-Asia trade lanes, in the past, such Philippine flag container line operations were not viable on then present competitive freight rates due to the higher operating cost in the Philippines in comparison to other Asian maritime countries, mainly due to taxation and red tape. In the new normal times, there will be, again, not sustainable without removing substantial road blocks and red tapes. I will give you some details later on that. Next slide. So here, some additional information which you may have already, but maybe just as a reminder. We are living at a time of consolidation of very big shipping lines and shipping associations, alliances. And here are the developments from 2012 to 2021. And as you can see, I will just jump from the first to the last box. In the first box, you had a lot of individual competitors in shipping lines. And if you look at box number 3, you will see that that was diminished, right? So 3 alliances of shipping lines dominate now the global market. Safeguards are needed to control monopolistic tendencies of behavior as expressed in the recent past and undefined destination charges, circumventing and disrespecting Incoterms, and charging largely undefined fees at the destination without the benefit of contract with the charged party. Legislation controlling these charges better are pending now in the legislative structures of several nations, including the Philippines. Well, it is actually pending in the Philippines, and I can give you as an information the number of House Bill 10575, which is enacting the competitiveness of Philippine maritime trade by strengthening the oversight functions of relevant government agencies over the imposition of shipping charges by international shipping lines and institutionalizing mechanisms for the efficient movement of goods. This bill has been read in third reading by the past Congress, and I'm of the opinion it is ultra important, very important to revive this and to pass it as soon as possible for the protection of Philippine importers. The United States and other countries, but particularly the United States, has woke up also to these kind of practices. And they have a law already enacted named Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022, Public Law 117 to 146, June 16, 2022. Okay, just a few days ago. But you see, as the Americans have reacted already, I think Philippines, for its own protection, also has to react as soon as possible. Yeah, here as promised, I'm going back to what I said, development of Philippine flag, Philippine shipping line, intra-Asia ocean carrier. a container carrier. I said there are several points, and I have here 10 points which I'm listing. I will go very briefly through it. But I can also tell you to have a look at the column of Andrew Masigan, a friend of mine who published his opinion yesterday in Philippine Star, this headline, Long Overdue Reforms for a Sustainable Maritime Sector. He made 12 points out of the 10, but in principle, we are both, advocating the same. So here are the main issues to be addressed in achieving the goal of maintaining a Philippine flag shipping line. Because remember, the time of Philippine Maritima and Maritime Company of the Philippines, which used to be shipping lines of the Philippines going to Europe, going to the United States, that's more than 35, 40 years ago. And in between, there was nothing until we, with a single vessel, have started it all over again. And I hope we all will grow. And this is not, a propaganda for Royal Cargo. It is, I hope, a wake-up call for the Philippines and also Philippine maritime companies to see the possibilities of intra-Asia. And with the help of government, even without subsidy, restart or rediscover the history of Philippine container shipping lines. So here are the main issues which need to be addressed. Number one, we need a one-stop shop government desk to handle all documentary requirements of such a shipping line and support it locally as well as internationally. Number two, the Philippines must accept international certificates and avoid duplicating such with Philippine credentials. That should not be necessary. No other international shipping line is subjected to such duplication. Number three, newly built containers should be recognized as ship's gear and be exempted from duties and VAT. For shipping lines exclusively in international trade, such VAT could never be recovered and would jeopardize their competitiveness against other international shipping lines. Number four, domestic service providers of Philippine flag vessels should not be mandated to charge VAT for their services, as the lines can recover any of such VAT. The same direction. Five, empty container positioning in the Philippines should not be subject to VAT as well, and port charges must be reasonable. The handling charges, for example, in Vietnam are not only about 1/3, some say even 10% only, but they allow to keep empties at on-dock CY for free storage charges without the necessity to truck them to off-dock CY. Actually, that is how they are trying to lure us actually to service Vietnam. So Philippine shipping line should be allowed to follow international standards concerning crewing formats and numbers of crew on Philippine flag vessels and not be forced to overcrew their ships, which is a fact right now. Number seven, they should be allowed to have their ships serviced by international accredited shipyards on competitive terms, because otherwise, if foreigners can have their vessels serviced in the Philippines or elsewhere in the world, and we can only go with our ships to Philippine shipyards, which, by the way, are most of them, if not all of them, are owned by foreigners and not Filipinos, then we will not be competitive in that field as well, cost field as well. Number eight, Philippine crew placement of Philippine ships should be recognized as local employment based on Philippine labor laws for domestic and international service, like any airline crew, by the way. So number nine, almost there, the Bureau of Immigration Deportation should treat Filipino crew employed by Philippine flag shipping lines and the Philippine registered company as locally employed, thereby not adding red tape when they depart for destinations abroad. Number 10, current Philippine law does not permit a Philippine flag vessel to be engaged in both international and domestic trade at the same time. IRIS is currently operating under a special permit valid for 12 months, for which we thank Marina, and I'm also pretty sure that they would extend it. But nevertheless, the laws restricting this kind of operations are still in force, and the government should consider relaxing this law. This is one of the benefits which will distinguish and differentiate a Philippine flag vessel operator from its international competition. we have to and we should promote the development of our maritime industry. Lately, there was the foreign, what is that? The act which was just amended, which now allows public, yes, but there's a name of that act. Public Service Act, yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm old, sometimes I forget things. So that's the Public Service Act. It was amended just recently. It opened for foreign investment in many areas, which I'm also advocating. It also allows actually foreign companies or foreign shipping lines to invest in Philippine domestic shipping. So if that is the case, and I'm not against that, competition is not bad, but especially at that time when that is possible, of course, I think Philippine flag vessels should be, at will, be operating domestically and internationally at the same time. If we can do that, it will be a competitive advantage over foreign shipping lines. This slide shows which lines have the most numbers of ships and containers. And maybe you can realize from this one that 4 out of the 5 biggest operators are Europeans. Yes, only one is Asian, and the biggest container shipping line right now, as you probably know, is Maersk Line. But as of October 29, 2021, the Mediterranean Shipping Company had the highest order book capacity of almost 1 million TEU. Ranking second, Evergreen Line has ships with a combined total of 700,000 TEU 20-foot container. So order book, in the order book capacity, if you see Mediterranean Shipping Line, if Maersk Line does not increase their investments, will be overtaken by MSC, by Mediterranean Shipping Line, just as a piece of information. Okay, I think this is also interesting to read. What about logistics companies? Where is, are these Asian logistics operators or Americans or European? Very clear. European companies are the largest ocean freight forwarders or logistics enterprises, led by Kühne + Nagel, with them alone handling over 4.6 million TEUs of ocean freight in 1 year. But if you look at the ones which are highlighted here in green, these are all European companies. Kühne + Nagel, DHL, DSV, DB Schenker, Siva Logistics, Hellmann, Geodis, company or firma Myers & Son, Bolloré Logistics, and Logwin AG. These are all Europeans. You have Asian ones here. You have Sinotrans. What else? The others are mostly American. Raueber Logistics. OOCL Logistics, yes. Nippon Express, Yusen Logistics, okay. But predominantly freight forwarding companies, big freight forwarding companies are Europeans. Where are the ships constructed? Number 1 in China. Number 2 in South Korea. Number 3 in Japan. Very little effort for the rest, actually. So here came the question, when will the situation go back to normal? We now experience unprecedented and unexpected demand for storage, transport, and shipping services that present supply of equipment and facilities can't meet, leading to significant cost increases for these services. Yes, while it's easier now to get space on ships, but try to store anything in the United States, for example, next to impossible. On shipping, the Philippines does not have direct shipping services to the USA or Europe. Actually, direct. Indirect, yes, but not direct. All Philippine imports and exports basically transship via main transshipment hubs, while international shipping lines can fill all vessels' capacity from their main port of call. As such, recently they even rejected shipments from transshipment ports, including those in the Philippines. And that is another point why it is important to have more than one single ship on Philippine flag, transporting goods from the Philippines abroad. Right now, really, every single centavo, every single peso on revenue, on income, and on taxation relating to freight is going abroad, except the one vessel which we have been operating. And as I explained already, we have to return from the USA trade because the vessel is too small to intra-Asia. But we will definitely increase that footprint of our company. Newly built containers are also still in short supply. And as you probably have seen in the recent past, also the purchase of containers increased by 200 to 300% for new containers. So the price of containers may stabilize, but not quickly, as pre and immediate post-COVID trade was slow. Many containers manufacturers, 97% based in China, reduced their production lines during that time. The unprecedented boom which followed caught all by surprise. Following that, prices for new built ships, charter rates, and freight rates have been based on demand and supply issues, which have significantly increased the charges, as you have all experienced, until the correction only of in recent months. Here are three possible solutions that need to happen to prevent or at least mitigate future potential disruptions. Next slide, please. Smarter, faster, more resilient supply chains. Before the pandemic, the supply chain was already experiencing growing pains in meeting the rising demand from an increasing population, gaining purchasing power, and propensity to shop online. The supply and demand issues during the pandemic only magnified how fragile the supply chain is, with fragmentation being at the core of the problem. Orchestrating a shipment remains an enormous challenge. For example, one global shipment through the network of cargo ships, ports, customs, airlines, rail lines, trucking companies can involve as many as 30 different organizations and more than 200 unique interactions from its manufacturer to its final destination without information connectivity to each other. Building a smarter, faster, more resilient supply chain is not easy. However, the pandemic saw changing participants' mindsets in the supply chain from a financially driven investment decision only to financial and risk mitigation. This shift is in perspective, I believe, and will spur improved connectivity through investments in automation and infrastructure in areas where bottlenecks occur, such as ports and road networks. In addition, companies will be more open to working together to improve coordination up and down the supply chain through data sharing and standardization, which will drive the digital transformation. The growing significance of regional and domestic supply chains, I mentioned a bit about that already. Lean, just-in-time inventory management had been the standard strategy for supply chains for years, allowing for reduced inventory levels and cost at the expense of resiliency and agility. Priorities have shifted with inflated volumes of goods transported. Companies are now forced to reevaluate and reformulate their contingency and risk mitigation strategies to cope with disruption. Supply chains became too global and are now adjusting towards more regional and local domestic ecosystems. Remember the slide where I've shown you how big actually intra-Asia is. So is that negative for us? I don't think so. I think it's very positive, actually. We are already in a post-globalization situation with the intra-Asia and intra-Europe trade volumes alone exceeding the traffic of the rest of the world trade values. Intra-Asia and intra-Europe combined. So one of my last slides. So as you can read here, currency value may self-correct through controlled inflation and so on. Investment in new technologies to digitize the supply chain, investments in domestic and local infrastructure, and the shift of people to start buying non-essential goods, experience, and services will not only prepare us to respond better to future potential supply chain shocks, but also reduce the excess market demand for supplies. While the renewed substantial spending for services is strictly not a solution, but a consequence of service availability, it will divert funds from purchasing of transportable goods. We will just not spend so much money anymore for transportable goods and will spend some of their money for services. Okay, last slide. If you look through that, in the Gartner survey released February 2021, 87 to 89% of supply chain professionals plan to invest to make their supply chains agile and resilient. Going into details, so within 2 years, we will invest to make our supply chains more agile, 89%. Within 2 years, we will invest to make our supply chains more resilient, 87%. Automation will enable us to make onshore and manufacturing economically viable, 56%. National interests and pressure to favor domestic operations will increase to influence and in influencing our own future supply chain decisions. Also a majority even of only 52%. So here are the answers to your questions. What can be done, what should be done, where the focus should be. I hope that the information I gave you today is helpful, and maybe some of the information was not yet available to you. I hope I have covered the subject okay, and thank you again for giving me the opportunity to be with you today.